Today we're here to talk about the Australian grass finches in family Astrilidae. First, I'm going to introduce you to the family of Australian grass finches, and then I'll lead you into their current conservation status, as well as what we currently know about them and what conservation plans are in place. And finally, I'll conclude with recommendations for each species I discuss for the future. So what are the grass finches? They are passerine birds of the family Astrilidae. As you can see in this phylogeny here from Olson and Alstrom 2020, I've noted in red all the grass finches that occur in Australia, of which there are 22. All but one are native. They're small granivorous birds with short, thick, pointed beaks. And while they share many life history traits, they vary widely in plumage, as you'll soon see. So why are grass finches important? Well, first of all, they're seed predators, so they're primary consumers, particularly of grains and grasses, but some also feed on insects, particularly in breeding seasons. They do have the potential of being seed dispersers. Research by Guerrero and Tai in 2009 found that with Darwin finches in the Galapagos, even those that primarily consumed grains did occasionally consume fruits and therefore disperse the seeds via that. There's also the potential that seeds may stick to their feathers or feet, and they can disperse them that way. As a very diverse family of finches, they're also widely popular in the pet trade, and zebra finches are widely used as research animals. Now for the conservation status of these finches. Of those 22 species, only 5, thankfully, have any listed conservation status. Now, internationally, only one of them is near threatened, but on a national level, 4 of the species are endangered. And finally, when you get to a state level, another species is near threatened as well. This is mainly due to taxonomy. For many of these species, their base species is of least concern nationally. However, they happen to have subspecies within Australia that are endangered. And at the bottom, listed from top to bottom, left to right, you can see these 5 birds. So what are some of the potential causes of decline? Well, one of the main ones is habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation. This is from urban development, but more than that, it's from the implementation of rangelands. This also fragments the habitat, and the grazing behavior from the cattle degrades the habitat and the diversity. There have also been changes in the fire regime. Historically, fires burned small and patchily, forming a mosaic, where some areas were recently burned and others had not burned in a while. And this was good for seeds because recently burned ground led to higher production of seeds the next season. But if they're burned each season, like historically, like recently they are, the plants produce fewer seeds and of poorer quality. There are also many invasive species that are affecting these birds. Exotic grasses, such as and other plants, such as the rubber vine depicted here, crowd out native plants and make it more difficult for the birds to find proper food. As specialized finches, a lot of them need to find seeds from specific species or even a specific size within that species. So the introduction of exotic plants does not help their plight. Potentially introduced predators might be a threat, although to date there isn't any evidence of this. And impacts by feral pigs on the tall grasses these birds rely on also cause an issue. Their rutting behavior damages a lot of grassland habitat. Although it's not as big an issue now as it was in the past, as colorful, beautiful birds, these finches are often trapped for the pet trade. It was banned several decades ago, but it still continues to some extent. Finally, there may be some hybridization with other subspecies, and for the Gouldian finch, they have found some evidence of disease possibly being a decline with a species of tick found in many wild populations. And ultimately, they may be threatened by climate change, as these birds depend on grains and grasses for their successful breeding. These grasses germinate following seasonal rains, and as these rains shift patterns due to shifting climate, they may shift outside of the bird's range. Now, we'll see in the future whether they're able to move along with these changing grass germination times and locations. Now, the 4 nationally listed birds each have a recovery plan. So for the Gouldian finch, Erythura gouldiae, they're on their 3rd recovery plan. They've described the ecological requirements of the species pretty well, and they've determined the main threats. So what they're currently working on is changes to the fire regimes aimed at improving Gouldian finch populations, especially at their key breeding sites. As I mentioned before, these birds really require more small-scale mosaic burns rather than the intensive controlled burns of late. They also need to improve the grazing, feral herbivore, and fire management actions, and develop population health indices to evaluate how the program is working. Finally, they need to work on improving reintroduction efforts, since previous efforts have not been very successful, as well as increase community education and participation. Now for the crimson finch and the starfinch, they're lumped under one national recovery plan as they have very similar life histories. They do have fairly well described ecological requirements and they're established as their specific subspecies. Now, as I said, the base species of each of these birds is not endangered, but is these subspecies which are. Now, their action plan focuses on needing to manage habitat for conservation in areas where there are known populations, monitor this effectiveness and be able to make changes as needed, and assess the potential for reintroduction of crimson finches in certain areas. Finally, for the black-throated finch, Pophyla cincta, they've formed a recovery team as well as undertaking surveys and monitoring and community awareness efforts. So they currently need to focus on identifying and quantifying threats, quantifying their distribution and abundance, protecting and enhancing their habitat, look into the potential for captive breeding, and increase public awareness of their status and conservation issues. In conclusion, each of these species of bird, other than the one that is near threatened, currently have recommendations via the Australian government. However, there are some other recommendations fed in from the literature. For the Gouldian finch, they are obligate granivores. Most of the other species can supplement their diet with insects, but not this one. So the seed availability is the limiting factor of where they can live. And thus their breeding is linked to the timing of the seed set of the annual native grass S. dipodium. And as mentioned before, low intensity burning early in the dry season can help promote optimal food and breeding resources for the bird. But this needs to be paired with patches of longer unburned vegetation. Euthuria maculavrei, which is near threatened, it needs to be monitored, and further research is needed into its ecological requirements in winter. Current research has not really found any reasons for why it is rare, so it may just be elusive. However, that's why more information is needed for its winter range, because its summer range does not currently seem to be affecting its status. And it does need protection of its preferred habitat, as its feeding habits rely on using woody plants to feed on tall grasses that border on the rainforest, so they have somewhere nearby to flee. For Neocmia phaeton evangeline, they need invasive species control. This one is affected by those feral pigs, by rabbits, and other species. It also needs adaptive fire management, similar to the Gouldian finch, and management of grassland diversity. This species, as well as the following one, they can only eat seeds of a certain small size. So they need multiple species to be able to, of grass, to be able to support themselves. As native species get crowded out or limited in how many are available, they may not be able to survive this change. And finally, Pophylla cincta, or the black-throated finch. We need to determine the relative importance of suspected threats and look further into their ecological requirements. And finally, as with all of the others, monitor the population trends and effectiveness of land management. Here are my references. Thank you very much, and I'll take any questions now.